Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. Let's talk about Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, the second month of sales. And I'm going by going to the end of the month, rather than going by the release day, month by month. There is still one day left, but I'm looking at the game. It doesn't look like there's going to be any crazy hatcher coming out tomorrow, so we can talk about it now. First of all, let's revisit the last month, the debut month. It had about 3 weeks to go, and it took in about 5 million USD. It never took number one in sales for a day. It never even touched number one at any time in any of the days or weeks since. And October is 4.6 million, which is lower. That's not great. Ideally, publishers want their second month to be stronger than their debut month, especially since it's usually longer. It shows that word of mouth is working and that the game is growing. Genshin started that way. A lot of people were skeptical of the game at launch, but after a few weeks of good reviews, that converted a lot of people. Still, not terrible for Square Enix, who is in reputation rebuild mode. But again, let's compare it to a few other games. First, there are some debuts that also came out last month. And there's one game that I forgot to mention, that is Monster Hunter Now. Pretty good month. Last month, 15 million. That was about 2 weeks, a little bit less than 2 weeks. But this month, it grew. It made 24 million. And then Power Pro and then Dot Hero, actually kind of flat compared to the previous month. But then compare that again. Power Pro was only released for about a week from the previous month. Dot Hero a little bit longer. So really, they've fallen since the previous month. And then some other games that I talked about before. Arc Knights had a big drop to 1.8 million, down from 5. They had the Nier Automata collaboration last month. Dragon Quest Walk also fell to about 15 million. Nikke kind of dropped by half to 6 million. Honkai Star Rail with a small improvement to 18 million. Genshin with a drop to 7.7. Uma Musume with a fairly big drop to 21 million, but that's still a ton of money. And then Monster Strike killing it with 17 million. That's almost twice the previous month. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. I've said it for years, but they are the gold standard when it comes to mobile games. And I wonder how many people at this point have a Max Luck Lucifer. And it's embarrassing to say at this point, but Nier Reincarnation, 300k for the month. Worst month ever. I might make a video kind of speculating why it's doing so poorly. But part of it has to do with kind of the mobile game industry as a whole. You just compare it to years past, and like the industry is lagging. I've hinted at this multiple times now, but many people, even within the industry, are saying that the bubble is bursting on the Japanese mobile game industry. I'll talk about this in detail more later, but part of it is because the pandemic is over, and so people are playing games less. And also because the yen is super duper weak. Oh, and I read like 2 minutes before I started recording this video, but Sega's biggest new mobile game release, Era Game Reset, just announced shutdown after a little over half a year. Sales were pretty terrible there. But yeah, I said a little while ago before uninstalling the game that if the Capcom and SNK collaborations did not sell, then the game would have no chance and they would shut it down, and here we are. And I wonder if Sega is going to attempt another mobile game. I talked about Sin Chronicle, how they failed there, and apparently did not learn their lesson. I'll link to that video below. Alright, part of the reason I wanted to make this video was to address how in my month 1 report video, I'll also link to that below, someone asked me to change my video because their source, Sensor Tower, had a different earnings result than the result that I reported. And making this video will give me a chance to talk about my source and to talk about Sensor Tower. Also, it will give me a chance to say that in 7 years of doing YouTube, I have never been asked to change a video in that way, and I am offended that someone would so heavily imply that I am not trustworthy. I'm just reading the site and passing it along. But perhaps the person just wants to drive a certain narrative, and then the data that I gave did not support that narrative. Also very offensive. But yeah, in 7 years I have never knowingly lied to my viewers, even if it would have led to more views and subscribers, and I have made every effort to never unknowingly lie by being thorough and doing my research, only talking about what I am very sure about, and giving disclaimers if I am at all unsure, and then taking down videos if they did include incorrect information. Now, my opinions and ratings and speculations on the future, those are all my views. Or they were my views at the time. And I stand by all of that, even if they are or were controversial. But yeah, straight up, objective information and facts I want to get right, and I think I have gotten it right. Let's talk about Sensor Tower versus my source here. Sensor Tower does not have access to the actual sales data from Apple or Google, and they have no access to Meta's data either. Where they get their data is from their own apps, which include screen time trackers, internet browsers, ad blockers, and VPNs. They take the data from their database and extrapolate that out to everyone and make estimates based on that. They do have a large install base of millions, but it's not everyone, and furthermore, how sure can we be that the type of folks that would install those free but they track you apps where the user's data is the product, how sure can we be that they are representative of the population as a whole? My source, which is well known in Japan and shouldn't be too hard to find, most content creators use it. I will not link to that because I refuse to be the reason why global folks find it. But it bases its numbers on the one type of data that the Apple App Store and Google Play Store make public, and that is the constantly updated sales rankings. It is updated throughout the day, and my source follows that throughout the day, and makes estimates based on positions of games relative to each other. There is a flaw in the system in that it can undershoot actual sales, especially on apps that hit number 1 in the rankings for reasons I'm not smart enough to understand. Also, the Google Play Store data is not nearly as reliable, so the site and its users largely lean on the Apple App Store data. I have heard from some global folks talking about Sensor Tower results that if you take the Apple App Store revenue and double it, you got the Google Play Store revenue, and I'm like, whoa! That is not scientific or reliable at all. All apps perform exactly the same all the time? That's just lazy thinking. And all the data I've seen is that folks on iOS spend more on apps per person than Android users. There are more Android users, but is it perfectly lined up so that it ends up that Google Play revenue is always double? If that is what Sensor Tower is doing with their reports, then I would be very skeptical of them. We shouldn't totally dismiss those results, but we should take them with a grain of salt and then understand where they are coming from and how it isn't totally representative of the population. Anyway, getting back to Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, I've been poking my head into global Reddit once in a while. There were a couple threads in there talking about the results of the first month, all going off of the Sensor Tower reports, and there was everything in the comments from, "This game is a runaway success," to "This game is crashing and burning." Imagine if the doomsayers were going off the results I was reporting. But reading that, I was reminded just how much global folks attach their identity to games, whether as a cheerleader or a doomsayer, as if a game doing well reflects well on them, or a game doing poorly makes them look clever, and they will twist everything in order to support their own stance. This is not to say this doesn't happen on the Japanese side, but here it's overwhelmingly doomsayers. But yeah, I have never based my identity on a game or a game system. I was there during the Sega does what Nintendo don't 16-bit throwdown, and I was like, I'll play both, I don't care. And with mobile games, I'll praise what I think deserves praise, and criticize what I believe deserves criticism. With some games, there's a lot to praise, and so I end up looking like a cheerleader. Or there's a lot to criticize, and I end up looking like a doomsayer. I've been both over the course of many games, but it almost always goes from cheerleader to doomsayer because I don't stick with games that start bad. Alright, finally here we can talk about some of the recent controversies and how global and JP communities have kind of responded differently to them. Both have to do with fairness, funnily enough, but they reflect on the communities differently. The biggest dust-up in global that I saw was that the crash difficulty of the Sephiroth boss fight was too tough, impossible for free-to-play. People were complaining that it wasn't fair that everyone couldn't beat it. To those of us familiar with Japanese mobile games, this point of view comes across as naive, but it makes sense if we keep in mind that the majority of the global community is still very much in a console gaming mindset, where everything in a game is equally available to everyone if they put in the effort. Some of the angriest I have ever seen global people is when I told them in a mobile game they are not meant to get everything. They took it personally, as if I had said they sucked as human beings and didn't deserve to have everything. This kind of thing is my cross to bear. On the JP side, there were two things. One was the damage exploit in the dungeon ranking, and the other was the compensation in pulling specific banners, and both were about fairness again. The damage exploit had to do with like magic attacks doing way more damage than they should have, and so people who are aware of it got an advantage in getting higher scores. The JP users were upset that the determination of scores was not fair, in that those who knew the exploit got an advantage. The second was the compensation, which was quite generous, but was for only some players who were lucky enough to pull the right banners. Something similar has happened in Near Reincarnation lately. JP users care about a level playing field for all players, which might sound funny in a game with spending options, but it's not that they want everyone to have the same account. They want everyone, whatever they invested in the game, whether time or money, to be properly and accurately represented in the game. And random giant compensations for only some users goes against that, and could be considered unfair. Okay, that'll do it for this video. I think I said the same thing at the end of the previous video, but I want to do live stream, live blogs until they announce a collaboration, because I'm curious to see how this game will handle that. Whether it's actual characters or whether it's just like costumes and weapons. And we'll see if I do a month 3 report. Depends how much other stuff I have to say. Okay, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.